I was teaching a yoga class when it happened. I suddenly collapsed. There were no signs, no symptoms, and no history of heart problems in my family. I was rushed to the hospital, where I was put into a medically induced coma while doctors evaluated the state of my brain. It was a terrifying time, as no one knew if I would wake up, and if I did, what condition I would be in. And if I did, what condition I would be in. My perception of the situation was vastly unique. It seemed as though I transcended the limitations of time itself. There was no linear sequence, no transition from one moment to the next. Instead, time took on a fluid and uncertain nature. Without any recollection of how I got there, I found myself walking through a captivating and enchanting forest. It was an ancient woodland, with towering trees that seemed to reach up towards the heavens. The trunks were slender, smooth, and exuded a refreshing energy. The leaves displayed shades of green with a subtle touch of autumn hues. There were magnificent birch trees, yet this forest was unlike any I had ever encountered in reality. It was an entirely unfamiliar world, perhaps the farthest I have ever traveled, although measuring the distance was impossible. In that moment, as the sun began to set and cast a gentle glow over everything, I found myself immersed in a scene that felt otherworldly. The colors, a mix of gold and fading light, painted a surreal picture. The source of the light seemed to come from all directions, yet there was no single point of origin that I could discern. The leaves above me were a blur of colors, too distant to distinguish. It was as if the forest extended infinitely upwards. But what struck me the most was the profound silence. Unlike any forest I had ever experienced, where the air is filled with the sounds of birds, insects, and the rustling of leaves, this place was enveloped in a stillness that was anything but oppressive. It was a liberating silence, as if the earth itself had created a soft, golden-red carpet of leaves beneath my feet. It felt like the autumn of my life. Yet the most surprising silence was that of my own thoughts. Normally, my mind is a whirlwind of competing thoughts, anxieties, and daydreams. But here, in this moment, all of that melted away. My mind was still, like a pool of water without a single ripple. It was a state of complete calm, oneness, and peace. I had a surreal experience where I felt like my spirit was separate from my body, walking alongside a mysterious androgynous being. This being guided me along a path in the woods, and I felt a sense of peace and happiness in this ethereal space. However, as the path curved ahead, I sensed that if I continued, I would cease to exist in my physical form. Despite my love for the woods and the tranquility I felt, I was suddenly pulled back by a physical sensation at my belly button. It was as if I was being forcefully brought back to reality, and then I woke up. During my coma, my fiancé and mother prayed for my recovery, and I believe their voices called me back from that otherworldly place. After spending 2 weeks in the hospital and undergoing numerous tests, doctors couldn't find any underlying issues with my heart except for a slight magnesium and potassium deficiency. They concluded that my experience was likely triggered by a symptomless genetic heart condition called long QT. I had a defibrillator implanted as a precaution, but since then I have not experienced any further heart issues. This story was shared by Lauren J. and happened in 2017. Story 2, I found myself standing in front of an immense structure. It resembled a building, but it was unlike anything I had ever seen before. The entrance had towering pillars reminiscent of ancient Roman temples. The illumination came from all directions, as if the light permeated every inch of the surroundings. The front of the structure featured a colossal archway with no doors. As I stared at it, my deceased uncle, who had passed away 5 or 6 years prior, appeared beside me. He urged me to enter the building, assuring me that he would join me inside. I strolled alongside my uncle in awe. The silence between us felt comforting, as if words were unnecessary in the presence of such magnificence. A sense of tranquility washed over me, erasing any worries or anxieties. Suddenly, as I reached the center of the room, my grandfather's voice echoed in my ears, uttering the words, "This is not your time." Startled, I halted and opened my eyes, returning to reality. I had a life-threatening experience where I was hospitalized and had to undergo a procedure to have a stent placed in my body. The doctor who treated me informed me that I was fortunate to have survived, as I had been clinically dead for 14 minutes. During the following decade, I experienced a series of health issues, including more heart attacks. After experiencing another major heart attack, I found myself in a serene and picturesque setting. I stood at the edge of a tranquil pond surrounded by a vast rolling field. In the distance, atop a hill, stood a towering pillar building that I had seen before. A mesmerizing waterfall cascaded into the pond, its flow appearing seamless and undisturbed. The beauty of this scene was enhanced by a line of trees that stretched from the right side of the field, almost reaching its center. This tree line held significance in this enchanting landscape. I glanced around and spotted my uncle once more. Despite his lips not moving, a smile adorned his face, as if his voice was directly transmitted into my mind. He greeted me with a cheerful, "Hello again," and raised his arms, inquiring if I liked my surroundings. I responded affirmatively, and he gestured towards the pond, declaring that it would be our fishing spot. To my surprise, I realized I was hovering just above the water's surface. Peering into the pond, I observed sizable fish gracefully swimming about. My uncle motioned for me to join him on the opposite side, and mentioned that someone was eagerly awaiting my arrival. As soon as it happened, a wave of indescribable emotion washed over me, enveloping my entire being. It was a sensation akin to love, but it was accompanied by a profound sense of knowing. In that moment, I was certain of the person who awaited me, and this realization only deepened my joy. Throughout my life, I experienced immense agony whenever I moved or sat for extended periods. However, upon reaching the afterlife, I was devoid of any pain or despair. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of joy. This happiness was not the fleeting kind that arises from material possessions or indulgences, but rather a profound and everlasting state of true happiness, encompassing all the joyful moments I had ever experienced in my life. As I stepped into the field, a sense of familiarity washed over me. I had a clear understanding of who I was supposed to meet and where I needed to go. Walking alongside my uncle, we gracefully moved across the field, heading towards the tree line at the back right corner. The trees stood tall with vibrant leaves in various shades of autumn. As we reached the edge of the tree line, which extended halfway through the field, a house came into view. As I explored the two-story house, I couldn't help but notice its unique feature. It was attached to a truck. It wasn't just being towed, but rather the house itself was the bed of the truck. It was a larger type of pickup truck specifically designed for pulling heavy loads. It was an interesting sight to see, as if someone could simply drive the truck and take the entire house with them. I returned to the porch of the house and approached the door, feeling a sense of certainty about who would answer. Deep down, I knew it would be my father, even though he had passed away a few years prior. This knowledge resonated within me. However, before my father could open the door, I heard another familiar voice from behind. It was my grandfather, who had also passed away around the same time as my dad. During this particular incident, my grandfather, who had saved me from a similar situation in the past, appeared to be more than just angry. It was a mix of concern and worry, as if I had done something incredibly dangerous, and he wanted to make sure I understood the severity of it. It was like being a child who had just done something reckless, and my parents rushed over to me, holding me tightly and scolding me, saying, "Never do that again. Do you realize how dangerous that was? We could have lost you." I couldn't see my grandfather. His voice conveyed the same tone. He spoke not to me directly, but to his son, my uncle, saying, "He is not done yet. He has to go back." In that moment, I felt my grandfather's hand firmly grasp my arm as he pulled me back up. After regaining consciousness, I found myself in a hospital bed, surrounded by nurses and doctors. Over the next few weeks, I had several appointments with a cardiologist who had been present when I woke up. He told me something that shocked me. I had been clinically dead for 27 minutes. The medical team had tirelessly worked to revive me during that time. The doctor referred to me as the luckiest man he had ever seen, and I couldn't help but feel grateful for the second chance at life. In a remarkable turn of events, the medical team had made the decision to cease their efforts to revive me. The doctor had even declared the time of my death. However, just as he was uttering the word death, a miraculous beep emitted from the heart monitor. Seizing this unexpected sign of life, they decided to administer one more shock with the defibrillator. To everyone's astonishment, my eyes flew open, and I began to move. The nurses were in awe, attributing my revival to the presence of a guardian angel. It was later revealed that they had administered over 13 shocks with the defibrillator, leaving visible burns on my chest as evidence of the ordeal. I have had the unique experience of visiting the same place twice after death. On both occasions, I was greeted by the same person, indicating a sense of familiarity. It is important to note that each visit was distinct, ruling out the possibility of my brain simply replaying the same scenario. Instead, these experiences provided a glimpse into what awaits me after death. Furthermore, these encounters reaffirmed that I have lived a good life, as I believe a negative experience would have unfolded if that were not the case. During my first visit, I sensed that the hallway of pillars I was walking down was leading me to someone of great significance. However, the second visit, where I was going to see my dad, felt different and carried a heightened sense of importance. This story was shared by Vali B and happened around 1999. Story 3. It was a party at night and I just wanted to have fun and unwind. I was with friends who smoked cannabis joints. I had never smoked this in my life. Out of pride, I dared not tell the friends who were present that I was not feeling well. So I got up to go to the bathroom. I got to the hallway and closed the door behind me. I started to feel my vision blurring, and I was stumbling while walking. I suddenly fell down. I felt absolutely no pain. Just then, I started to see a dark tunnel with an ultra-bright, white and scintillating light at the end. I was attracted by the light, and therefore decided to get closer to it. Once I arrived in the light, my maternal grandfather, who had died when I was 13, welcomed me with open arms. I was happy to finally be able to see him again. We started talking, and he told me that I had just fainted, but that I must not worry, that everything was going to be fine. We went over my life until that day in a loop format. Then I saw my paternal grandmother, who had died when I was 16. I asked my grandfather why my grandmother was in the dark. He told me to not look at the dark, to always fix the light. He said to me, "Grandma is in the dark because she left with a heavy secret that was never revealed." He revealed it to me and told me to use the knowledge wisely. We were not solid. We were like a luminous, shimmering vapor. It felt truly an unconditional love, incomparable to anything down here on earth. I also remember that there was a golden line that I wanted to cross. My grandfather shouted at me to stop. If you cross that line, there is no turning back. But if you don't cross it, you may still be able to choose to return to your body. Look at you. I turned around and saw myself in the hall, lying on the ground where I had fallen. My friends were on top of me trying to revive me. I could feel their stress. I tried to ask them to stop, to tell them that I was fine and that I was quite well, but of course no one could hear me. My grandfather said, "You still have a lot to accomplish here on Earth, and your earthly mission is not over. The time has not yet come to join me." He added, "You have a 1.5-year-old son who needs you." I asked, "How do you know that since you died when I was 13 years old?" He replied, "From up here, we know everything and see everything." We both said to each other, "See you soon." I returned to my physical body as if I were diving from the 4-meter-high diving board of a swimming pool. Once my soul had returned to its place in my body, I woke up with friends above me who were more than panicked. I had trouble breathing and couldn't speak. They had to take me outside and pour cold water on my face. It took 10 minutes before I could sober up. I still felt sick, but after the 10 minutes, I remembered in detail the magnificent experience I had just had. I didn't dare share it right away. I was afraid that they would not believe me and call me crazy, although I knew what had just happened to me. Since then, my intuition is extremely developed, and I often enjoy astral outings outside of my body. Death no longer scares me because I am now convinced that there is another kind of afterlife after the death of our physical body. This story was shared by Sinayev and happened in 2011.